Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we are taking a look at the roster for the 2023 Seoul Infernal, first season of the Infernal, who of course spent the past 5 seasons as the Philadelphia Fusion. Now moving into 2023, they have rebranded, they have relocated, and they are now the Seoul Infernal. Last year, the Fusion finished the season with an 11-13 record, 0 map differential. They did well in tournaments. They got second place in the Kickoff Clash in the APAC region. They got 4th overall in the Midseason Madness across both regions, of course. And then not quite as much success in the Summer Showdown. They got 3rd, and then they got not great in the playoffs. Going into 2023, they've made some changes to their roster. Not wholesale, not full roster shakeup, but definitely some somewhat noticeable changes. So we can look at their roster, and you can see it here on your screen. They have MN3, Zest, and Fixa all returning from last season. And then Mag and Skewed, the other 2 players joining this roster. No confirmation or rumors, as far as I know, for the 6th person on this roster. So right now they are just a 5-man team, and we'll see what happens going forward. I'm not 100% sure what to expect from them, but I'll give you at least my thought process, what I hope they do for the future of this team. So let's go and let's start with the main part of this roster that is returning this year, and that is the DPS duo of MN3 and Zest. We saw a lot of them last year. They were the main 2 players that we saw in that damage duo last year. We saw occasional Carpe, but generally speaking, it was MN3 and Zest. So MN3 is going to be the main hit scan player for this roster. That is what he plays more than anything else. And then Zest plays a bit of kind of a rotation of heroes. He does play quite a few. He plays Tracer for this team. That's kind of his main thing that he's very known for, which is good for this roster because he is going to be the primary Tracer player. So in kind of Tracer Widow or Tracer Ashe or Tracer Cassidy metas, there is the strong possibility for them to run pretty much everything you would expect from them. That's kind of what you can run as your kind of primary composition here on this lineup. I definitely think double hit scan is where they are the most lacking, potentially. They don't really have much of anything in the form of secondary hit scan potential. Like I said, Zest can play Tracer, but we did not really see Zest play out a double hit scan last year. So MN3, very strong on the the Sojourn, the Ashe, the Widow, the Cassidy, but you don't have a secondary one with Zest. So damage, but definitely a potential thing that they'll look into adding to this team to kind of round out this roster. Potentially, I don't know if it's my favorite choice or my number 1 thing that I think they should add, but it's certainly something there, certainly a possibility. I trust Zest as a player. I think he's very, very good. I think generally speaking, you want Zest in as much as possible. So I don't really think we'll see a lot of Zest subbing out. I do think you have to understand that sometimes, like, if you just don't have the means to play a hard meta, you should have another option, but I generally think that Tracer is a very solid pick. Tracer's almost always meta, especially in the Overwatch League. So I think as long as you can have Zest on Tracer and MN3 play hit scan, I think the roster will be fine. But it's always definitely a potential concern for this roster here, but one that I don't feel like it's too bad, and I think that they, generally speaking, are in a pretty good position here because I thought that this duo did a very good job last year. Obviously, this team was good last year. They weren't great last year, but their current conditions in the APAC region going into 2023, I think this roster is in a very good spot at the very least, and I think they should be able to do pretty well when it comes to playing in a kind of APAC region is pretty weak. I think they are arguably the best duo in the region. They're certainly up there as one of the best duos in the region. Maybe not the best, but they're certainly up there, and I think that is one of the things you have to be very, very, very happy with if you are the Seoul Infernal. So let's move on now to the supports. They have two supports, Fixa, who is returning from this team from last year, and Skewed, who comes over from the Los Angeles Gladiators. I'll start with Fixa. I thought Fixa was a pretty good player last year. I thought he was better in the early part of the year. I thought that as time went on, I thought he kind of struggled a bit more in the second half of the season. I wasn't super excited by what he showed in that kind of second half of the season. I don't think he looked as strong as time went on. I think some of that was just that the region got a little bit better around him. Shanghai struggled a bit early in the year, but they kind of found their footing late in the year, and the Fusion started to struggle more late in the year. So I don't think it's necessarily all on Fixa, but I do think he's a smart re-signing. I think you have someone who is familiar with the team around him. He knows the guys. He played with them last year, and so in that way, you have the benefit of strong play out of Fixa. He's someone that you can rely on pretty heavily to come up big, generally speaking, when you kind of need your support play. And he's pretty versatile. Obviously, he's mostly going to play stuff like Lucio and Brig and Mercy, but we did see him flex a bit to double flex support last year, and he looked fine. I think that's kind of the big thing with the support line, is it's a very flexible support line. Fixa has made the sub over to flex support heroes like Ana, and has looked pretty good. And of course, Skewed mostly played Brig when he was with the Gladiators for the past couple of seasons, but we did also see him play, stuff like Zen and Bap and Ana. Not so much Ana, because Shu ran a lot of Ana, but in those double flex metas, yes, he would come in and play the Zen or the Bap, whatever they kind of needed in that kind of situation. So maybe Ana, I'm a little concerned with Skewed, because we haven't really seen it at the Overwatch League level, but at the very least, we know he's got a really good Brig, and we know he can play stuff like Zen and Bap at an Overwatch League level. So there is some flexibility between these two. There is a little bit of overlap in kind of ways that you wouldn't really expect. Like I said, Fixa might be the better Ana between these two, whereas Skewed might be the better Brig between these two. But there is certainly reason to think that these two can kind of meld their roles decently well, and I think that they'll kind of know what each other's strengths are, weaknesses are, and they'll find ways to work that into what you're doing, right? Like, if we get a Brig Ana meta, it's very possible that we see Skewed Brig and Fixa Ana, and then you could have a Lucio Zen, and it's Fixa Lucio, Skewed Zen. So I think that they have the flexibility in their support line. I don't really think they need another support. If they add another flex support, I wouldn't complain. I do have some concerns about Skewed as the primary flex support for this team, because, like I said, we haven't seen him in that role since he joined the Overwatch League, because when he was on the LA Gladiators, he was playing second fiddle to Shu, which isn't necessarily an indictment on Skewed. Shu is just that good. It's very rare with someone that good that you're going to actually play them over somebody as good as Shu. But it is definitely a slight indictment, and at the very least, I want to see what he's able to do as the main flex support for a team, because we haven't seen it. He was always the secondary guy. So give me a meta where he's the main one, and I want to see kind of how he plays. But I do think he looked good when we did get to see him, so I'm not too concerned about him as a player. I think he does look, generally speaking, pretty good, and I think overall it's a good addition to this team. I think it's an upgrade over Aim God they had last year. So all in all, I do think it is a pretty good way to kind of build this team. Final player on this roster is Mag, of course, formerly of the Boston Uprising, which ended last season, but he also spent a year and a half on the Washington Justice, so most of his time in the Overwatch League. Mag, you're going to get pretty good play in the tank role, especially on Winston. That is his bread and butter. That is his best hero. His Reinhardt's also pretty good. We saw him play some Doomfist last year. We saw him not really play a lot of that Junker Queen effectively last year when he was on Boston. Punk kind of took over for that Boston team down the stretch. So I am not a huge supporter of Mag as a solo tank for this roster. I would like to see this Infernal team add another tank player to play some of those off-tank, heroes like your Divas, your Zaryas, and even like Junker Queen. I don't think Mag was great on that role. There are some good options, obviously, in contenders or just former veterans, right? Like Fury was on this team last year. I don't think they'll bring him back, but he's out there as a potential option if you wanted to bring him in. There are some other off tanks that you can find from contenders, and also we just saw Gargoyle return to the Houston Outlaws. So there's always players that are available to be signed who are very, very good. And who knows, Piggy even probably is going to be on the Guangzhou Charge, but he could be available too. We don't know. But generally speaking, I think that Mag is a good player on the heroes that he's good at. I don't think he has the flexibility that I would want, like I said, in a solo tank. I thought his Winston was always really, really good. I remember that game between Washington and Dallas back in 2021 that, Mag actually, dominated for most of that map. The only map that they lost was one where Fearless set, a record on Winston for Primal Reach kills. So Mag has the mechanical skill, especially on Winston. I think that you put him in a team environment like this one, which I think is very, very solid, and is a strong team environment. I like what you have with M3 and Zest. You have very consistent damage play and damage dealers in both your hit scan and your flex DPS role, which I don't think was always the case with Washington. And I think that Washington struggled a bit in the support line while Mag was there. I don't think that's as big of an issue here, though I still don't think it's a great situation for Mag. This, to me, is not the perfect environment for Mag. I do think he should have a better season this year than he's had the past couple of years. He's back in Seoul, or he's back in Korea. I don't know if he's from Seoul or not, but he's back in Korea, so he has, at the very least, he has more comfort. He gets to kind of play in his home country. I think that helps a lot. He's in a region where there's not a ton of strong main tanks. So in the event that there's a hard Winston meta or a hard Reinhardt meta, you got Gushui, and that's about it to compete with. So in that way, I think you have places where he can be very, very good and can excel, and you'll see him probably look stronger, potentially, than some other tanks in the region. But I don't, like I said, I really do not love him as a solo tank. It didn't really work in Boston. He did not impress me enough at the end of the year last year to solo tank for that team. Some of it's new team environment, very different kind of structure. I think that is part of it as well. But to me, I just have not been impressed by what we saw from him outside of, Winston and Reinhardt. So I would like to see them bring someone else in to kind of play secondary to him in those other metas. Because to me, what we're seeing a lot, we saw this in the Pro-Am, we saw this with teams like Houston, who I think don't have both of their tanks yet. I think that I don't think Gargoyle's with the team yet. We saw it in New York. They struggled to play off tanks with Kellen as their only tank player. And I think that will be the same case here. To me, if you can't run D.Va, if you can't run Ramatra, which I think Mag will probably be able to pick up Ramatra pretty easily, but if you can't run D.Va, I don't think you're in a good spot. I think you need to be able to play D.Va because there are just too many times where D.Va is a good tank. D.Va is one of those heroes that maybe isn't always the most meta, but is always to some degree a meta pick, is always to some degree a strong hero who can counteract very specific types of playstyles, right? We saw it was an issue for teams who couldn't run D.Va against Twisted Minds on the Pharah. Now, I don't expect there to be a ton of Twisted Minds, Pharah-style play in the Overwatch League, right? But it is at least worth noting that you're playing against some contenders teams. Some contenders teams will probably go for some weird, different style looks than what they would be expecting potentially from, other teams in the Overwatch League. I mentioned it in my last video when I meant to talk, or maybe it was the Seoul Dynasty video. One of the last ones I mentioned Kleston when I meant to talk about Jihoon. Kleston is a player who's out there right now, right? He was on T1 in contenders. He's going to be able to play stuff like D.Va and Zarya and Sigma that I think would help Mag. To me, Mag is a player who the best way to actually put Mag in a position to succeed is to not make him stretch himself thin. I think that is a very important part of what makes Mag a good player, is that he has heroes he's very good at. I don't think you can rely on him to be your only guy. So if Kleston comes out of retirement, he just recently retired, so if he were to come out of retirement and join this Infernal team as a secondary tank player, I think it would work better for this team because I would rather see Mag in a position to succeed that doesn't require him to stretch himself thin and play a bunch of different heroes, because in my opinion, most of what we see in the league is that if you don't have the ability to run 2 tanks, you better have a tank that can run everything super, super well. And I think that there's always going to be metas where you are justified in just wanting, someone who can just play an off-tank hero, right? So it's tough. There are certainly reasons to think that signing another tank might be the right option, might not be the right option. I would go for that because I do think more often than not, that will be the thing that hurts this team more than anything else. And once again, much like I said with Skewed, I don't want this to sound like an indictment of Mag as a player. I want this team to be able to succeed, and I think there is always an element of understanding your player's strengths and weaknesses, and understanding that just because something is the best option for, kind of team synergy, potentially isn't the best thing for the team. And Mag being your solo tank might be good in the sense of you don't have to worry about changing comms up, of having a different tank come in, but if he can't play D.Va, and a D.Va meta comes up, in an APAC region that is winnable this year, very, very, very winnable, I think you need to consider having someone there to hold the line on some of those heroes that I just would not want to see Mag run, because I just don't think that that's really his strength. But like I said, this region's very winnable. This is not a great region. There's a couple of teams that I think look pretty solid. Like, I think the Fuel should be good. You're not going to beat Hanbin in a D.Va duel or a Sigma duel. You have Void on the Dynasty. You're not going to beat him in an off-tank duel. Gushui and 20, you can probably match up with Gushui decently well, but who knows if 20 looks good on the off-tanks, that's a tough out. Piggy on the Charge, another example of if he's looking good, that's a really good roster. That's a really good off-tank team. I think they have the benefit with main tanks. I think an off-tank would help. That's really my big thing. So I think this team has a chance of doing well. I think that they really need to focus on getting I think their 6th player should be someone who kind of helps their biggest need, which to me is that. I think the other thing I would see them doing is another damage dealer. Though last year they didn't really play as well when they took MN3 or Zest out. Like, they just were very good with those two in. Those two were generally the best. Some of that I think was just that Carpe didn't always come in on the best compositions and whatnot. But to me, it's all about if you're going to sign a 6th player, which they have to, get the best option, which to me is a tank. So that's my take on the team. Let me know, like I said, if you agree with me, let me know in the comments down below. If you disagree with me, let me know in the comments down below. What do you think this team should do for their 6th player? What do you do if there are holes on this roster? What do you think that is their biggest need? What do you think is the thing you would like to see them add to this team? Because I do think this is a solid roster as a 5-man core, but I definitely think that I'm not ready to put this team up super high in any kind of power rankings until I see who their number 6 is, because to me that's super, super important. That's going to be all for me for today. Thank you all once again for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want more like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing. And as always, I hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.